is our first time being at Barnes & Noble, and we hope to do many more events. And that being said, we'll get started with the interview. Thank you again.
Alrighty, hello everyone. My name is Nathan. I will be the interviewer for today's event, and I just want to piggyback off of what Elias just said right now. BookBase started off with this mission to bring people together through reading. And while that is a great mission and something that we take pride in trying to achieve, it came with its struggles, and there were a lot of pivots and turns that every startup comes up with, but there was definitely difficulties along the road. We started moving on to doing Zoom interviews with authors to make it more accessible, and we just kept on meeting more people, and eventually evolved into doing in-person events like the one that we're at right now. Except there's a big difference. We're no longer at a park, and we're no longer at a coffee shop. This is a bookstore, and not only a bookstore, it's the biggest bookstore in America, as it's one of the biggest bookseller chain retailers. And I just want to say this is an incredibly special moment just because of that. And I want to say thank you once again for all of you guys to be here and to listen to us talk about books. This is something that I was just talking to Greta about this. We never thought this would happen so soon, but it's definitely a blessing. And I do want to give a shout out to Elias. These cameras, the speakers that are set up, that's all Elias, just making sure that on the back end everything's good. I want to thank all of our supporters for coming to each event and just making sure everything's okay. And I want to give a special shout out to a friend that isn't here right now, but he's always been a great supporter of ours. He helped us make a theme song for our BookBase videos. His name is Leif. And I know, he's actually right there behind us. But yeah, I just want to say thank you to Leif for coming by. He's going on a trip. He's going to be visiting families. He won't be with us, but he was an incredible form of influence for us to be the creatives we are today. And he helped us be a part of that. So I just want to say thank you to everybody. But that being started, Greta, how are you feeling today?
Very good, thank you.
Of course. How do you feel to be here at Barnes & Noble today to talk about The Cliff House, the debut of your almost true crime series?
Oh, super excited. And I was just saying to Nathan before the event, I was at an author friend had a Barnes & Noble event about a year ago, and I was super happy for her and super jealous. And I was like, dang it, I want a Barnes & Noble event. And then it was at Christmas time, I was in Barnes & Noble with my daughter, and I was like, oh, wouldn't it be nice? And then bing, I'm here at a Barnes & Noble. So yay, yeah, I know. It's like very exciting, and exciting that there's actually people there too to look at. Like, it's not just me and Nathan, not that he's not adorable, but it's nice to have more people to look at, so.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for being here. It's exciting to just be able to be here and talk to you about a book at a bookstore that, just centers around community. And, just getting right into it, your novel, The Cliff House, it's clear right away that this is going to be part of a series because of how it starts. I picked this novel because of two reasons. One of these reasons is the murder mystery itself, with it being, it takes place in an open house, a realtor's trying to sell a house, but creepy stuff just keeps on happening, and it's kind of hinting at there may be something, more dangerous kind of coming around the corner. I just wanted to ask, where did you get this idea of having a threat exist in a place where it's practically empty? Like, the whole goal is to just sell the house, but in this book, it's so much more complex than that. I just wanted to ask, where did you get the idea?
So I love haunted house stories. I am like a complete patsy for haunted house stories. And this is not a haunted house, but the atmosphere of a haunted house, like that something creepy is happening here, and I don't know what it is, and I don't know why. Like, that to me is one of the ultimate chills, So I went down that road. And then the original version of this book was actually part of a different series, and it was part of the 7 Deadly Sins. And so when I wrote that book, it was much closer to a time. My husband used to be involved in residential real estate sales. Wow. I said creepy, and everybody's phones went off. Like, it's a Twilight Zone moment. Anyway, so, back in the day when he sold residential real estate, we were in and out of a lot of houses. And sometimes houses just have a vibe, right? From things that have happened there, and you just feel the vibe. And so I wanted to bring that atmosphere to the forefront. And so I thought, what if an agent got a listing for the house that would change her entire career? It's a beachfront property on the cliffs in Laguna, right? That's like going to change her career. The only hitch is the last agent to rent out to try to rent out that property, to list that property, was found dead in an upstairs bedroom. So that's a hitch. Like, she had to decide, do I do it or do I not? Was it the house? Was it personal? And why did that lady die in this house? So that was sort of the opening conundrum for the main character.
No, thank you for sharing that. And there's a quote that is in the book that I think kind of furthers what we're talking about. You wrote, "Houses are like dogs. They're emotional vacuums. They absorb the love, the hate, the kindness, and the violence that happens inside them." And I think that's such a special quote to me when I was first reading it, because I agree with you. I think, if there's anything, the energy that partakes in the house, or the people that, do things in the house, I think it resides in the house even after they leave. And, I'm saying this, but the reason I think it's also kind of funny is because if I had my dream house available and I found out like somebody passed away, I don't think that would stop me right away. But, oh, that just means a cheaper listing, like I'll just grab it, okay. But if I found out that that person got murdered in the house, well, like, okay, well, that's a little bit of a different story. And like, I think it's funny because this book essentially it's kind of like a game of coincidences. And the whole thing is how many coincidences is a little bit too much to kind of get the idea that something weird is happening. And, I think it's a cool question because I've always heard, you always see creepy stuff happen sometimes, like that's just life, but you always hear someone go, that's just a coincidence. And then you see something else happen and you're like, well, two coincidences, like, it's just random. But there are some people that are okay with 5, 6, 7. You're like, okay, buddy, get the picture. You gotta go. Like, you gotta get in the car and leave. And I think, I just wanted to ask you this, like, for you personally, like, if you were the person getting the house, or if you were the realtor that was selling the house, and you're kind of getting this vibe, like, okay, well, there's misplaced objects, or like, oh, maybe one day you kind of see a crease in the bed and you're getting the idea that maybe someone slept there, but oh, that could just be the contractor. Or maybe, in the book there's a situation where there's a dead animal on the lawn and you're just thinking, oh, well, that just happens, I guess, For you, like, where would you call it quits and be like, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore?
At the cockroaches. Yeah, I hate cockroaches. Like, pathological hatred of cockroaches. So of course I had to have a cockroach scene in the book because all your greatest fears got to come out in there. So there is a scene where she goes into the house and they're going to show the house that day, and there's just this river of cockroaches just coming out of the fireplace, just a river of them. She sticks it out, she does run out of the house and get somebody else to clean up the cockroaches. But I probably would be like, yeah, no, I'm done. I'm not doing this listing anymore, with the cockroaches would have got me.
It would have got my mom too, because my mom hates cockroaches. And I remember like a couple weeks ago, I was in the bathroom, I was brushing my teeth before bed, and I know my mom is really sensitive to bugs or anything. And I had to be the hero because I was the only one that saw a cockroach in the house, and I was like, I hate bugs as well. But I know my mom hates them more, so I was like, okay, like, I guess you would want me to do this. I'm like, trying to like get rid of it and stuff, and it was just me just running around with the can of Raid, and I think I accidentally sprayed my arm or something. It was just a mess. But, I'm glad that, I think it's cool that you use your own fears as inspiration to craft mystery novels, and especially thrillers that feed off of that anxiety. I think not many authors really talk about that. I wanted to ask, like, how much is your own fear implemented in all these novels that you write? Like, I know this is the first book and you have a whole series, but do you always go back to like, oh, what creeps me out? Or is it also something you read in the news maybe? Or like what kind of serves as that inspiration to make that creepy atmosphere?
Yeah, I not that I have thank God, I have not experienced everything in my novels. That would be really bad. Talk about coincidences. Like, seriously. But, you know, it's always that you want to put, there's always something of you in your books. And if you have a fear of something, or you've experienced something, or you're in your imagination, you thought that you were experiencing something only to find out it wasn't that, you have that idea of what that fear is. And so I always do try to channel that in my stories. And I think probably I would say most mystery thriller authors that I know, I always say that there's two kind of people. There's probably a lot more than two kind of people, but for the purposes of this conversation, two kinds of people. The kid who, when they hear something, they pull the covers over their head and sing little songs to themselves. And then the kid who's like, you know, looking around, what's happening out there? And I am most of the time, my husband is looking at me because he knows one time I pulled the covers over my head, but that's a story for another day. But most of the time, I've been the kid who wanted to know if something was in the closet or something was under the bed, or I'm the kid looking. And I do think a lot of mystery thriller authors, it's sort of like a way of tackling your own fears, to go in and to write the thing that scares you, and then have your character like have a victory over this thing, like win. You know, so it's sort of this tackling your fear with a positive outcome. It's a little cathartic, and it's probably a little therapeutic, and helps me with all my neuroses. So that would be, yeah. So I haven't experienced all those things, no. But I don't like cockroaches. I've never experienced a river of them in a house I was trying to sell, but I could channel that 15 cockroaches I saw at once, and that scared me, into what if it was 1,500? How much more scary would that be? You know, that kind of thing.
Right. Now, if I applied that same logic, if I was in a house full of 1,500 clowns just staring at me while I'm trying to sell the house, I'd be creeped out as well. So
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's definitely a great way to, you know, kind of get into that mindset.
I have no clowns in any of my books, and for whatever reason, I never was scared of them until I found out everybody else was. And so I was like, should I be scared of clowns? I don't know. But anyway, they're not in my books because I don't have a strong fear factor with the clowns. Yeah. Serial killers, yes. Clowns, not so much.
That's hilarious because my ex-roommate, when I went to UC Santa Barbara, Jeremy over there with the camera, he was my roommate, and that was during the time when there were clowns coming up in like the forests and stuff. Like you just see them on the side of the street. And I remember looking at the news and I'm like, oh, like there's one in the forest. Okay, that's weird. And then you see another one and then another one. I remember looking at Jeremy, I'm like, if I see a clown, like it's either we hit or we run. Like I'm not gonna talk to him, I'm not gonna do anything like that. So, and I think that's interesting because in your bio and on your website, you know, you do talk about you being an optimist, saying that, you know, you believe that the better you understand what drives us, the better our lives will be. And you're on this quest of understanding the why behind the crime instead of like the details of like what that crime is. And I wanted to ask you, have you always been on that quest of wanting to know the why? Like, was that just a natural curiosity, or was there something like, you know, in your life experience that kind of made you be like, wow, like not only do I want to discover what this is, but I kind of want to write about it and kind of get into mystery thrillers? Kind of just asking about like your origins of like why you do write the novels that you do write.
Well, I write what I write mostly because that's what I love to read, but that also is like, why do I love to read it? Why am I attracted to that kind of thing? And I think I am like very curious, especially about evil. I'm not saying I'm perfect, okay? But I don't do like cruel and unkind things, and I don't understand the drive to do cruel and unkind things. It's just like, I don't get it, you know? And so I guess I have kind of a morbid curiosity about that. And I did grow up in Manhattan when Manhattan was a pretty scary city, and did experience some scary things. My downstairs neighbors it was hot, and they were still up like third story. But they had a balcony and they had the thing open, and one night they woke up with a guy in their bedroom pointing a gun at him who came in off the balcony. I mean, I had some scary things happen to me with like gang things and stuff like that when I was a kid. And so I do think that kind of puts it in your head going, oh, right, there's the easy thing, like, well, they want money. and that's an easy thing. We can all understand that. But there's some things that people do that have nothing to do. Like, what is the gain that they're going to get out of this thing? And there's so many other legitimate ways to get money. Why would you do that? So I guess it's always been in my mind. And so I do try to not create two-dimensional bad guys. Like my villains, I want there to be not an excuse for what they did, but a reason that set them on the path that they were set on. Like that you could kind of go, okay, I can see how a certain personality type might be warped into doing this kind of thing because of their life experiences.
No, and you definitely do a good job doing it. I mean, you have two series. You have the almost true crime series that we're talking about, with the first book being The Cliff House. And then we also have the Mortician series, and the accolades that you've also gained, such as being a USA Today Bestselling author. It definitely shows that you put effort in wanting to understand how people operate. And I think there is a natural curiosity that we as humans have towards, the absurd, the weird, and sometimes even the morbid things that we see. I mean, true crime documentaries are real for a reason. There's always an audience that love just exploring that concept. I mean, I have phases where I'm watching unsolved mysteries, and if my sister doesn't text me like 5 minutes after I send a message, I'm like, oh, she's gone. Like, there's some, we need to call somebody, and she's just driving. And there is a natural, while there is a sense of fear and anxiety when you do learn about stuff like this, there's also a sense of curiosity to kind of understand, like, well, what really drives someone to do something like this? And in The Cliff House, there's a couple conversations that deal with the theme of nature versus nurture, the question of whether it's someone's environment or someone's natural ability that makes them who they are. And in the first half of the book, your character, the podcaster Molly, says, I just want to mention that Gwen, the real estate agent, like the real estate killer, doesn't have the happiest of childhoods, but she didn't go around killing people. And I think this is an interesting quote because in the book, there's multiple perspectives. You get the perspective of Gwen, the main character. She's selling the house. Super creepy as she's kind of seeing what's going on around her. But then you get the second perspective, and it's the killer himself. And with this perspective, you gain the lore that Gwen, you were talking about, right? Like, what makes someone do the things that they do? And in this novel, you learn about his backstory. You kind of understand, like, why this character thinks the way that he does. And does that rationalize his behavior and his actions? No, but I definitely think it's interesting that, you have a character that is the recipient of all this trauma, like, trying to sell this house and seeing cockroaches, dead things, misplaced objects, but it's also being inflicted by someone that was also trying to deal with their trauma as well, someone that was also trying to deal with their problems. And, I wanted to ask you this question because there's also this kind of this debate that happens in the novel, this nature versus nurture. And I wanted to ask, as someone that specializes in writing murder mysteries or just thrillers, what do you think about this debate? Like, do you think that when someone does commit something weird or heinous like that, where it's like, they're clearly trying to make someone upset or they're trying to bother someone, do you think it is nature? Do you think it's nurture? And I feel like that's also, the reason I'm curious is because in your bio, like, it's part of the why I'm sure that you're always looking for when you're writing these stories. You also want to explain that. So I'm just curious, like, what's your thinking process on that debate?
Well, I've actually done quite a bit of research on psychopaths, because doesn't everybody? But there is a genetic component to psychopathy, and it's been proven that, there's, in fact, I really go into the whole genetic aspect of psychopathy in the book, which one is it? In the Manor, in that one. And well, I don't, in case you read it, I don't want to spoil it, but I do go into it a lot more there. So there definitely is a genetic component, and like we all know that, like the typical psychopath, they just really don't, they're missing an empathy chip, so they just have a really hard time. If you feel pain, they don't go, oh, that poor person, they feel pain. They're like, they feel pain. I mean, it doesn't register. They don't have the ability to experience it vicariously through somebody else. Now, one of the men that did a lot of research on psychopathy, who I followed, is actually a doctor. And in the process of the research, he inadvertently, because he had all of his staff and all these different people fill out, all these forms and all this like questionnaires and stuff to discover, how does this personality trait fit with their genetic makeup. And he found this one, and of course they had nobody's names on it. And so he found this one that was like, this one is like, wow, this person Q has the genetic makeup and the personality traits and this and that. Who is this person? And it was him, the doctor who was doing the thing. And he went home and he was talking to his wife about it. And she was like, what, yeah, you didn't know that about yourself? And he's like, no. But he wasn't evil. He didn't kill people, nothing. But then he did some that history, like what's it called, where you go back and look at your family tree? Yeah, like his genealogy, right? And he discovered that he had all these like terrible people in his family history, like Old West bank robbers and killers and all that. And he was like, wow. I mean, he really did come from a line of people who did those things. But one of the things he discovered, he was raised in a very healthy home with parents who loved him, and he had a lot of good boundaries and discipline and all that. So he channeled that into being a little bit ruthless in his career, like he wasn't super good mentor. He didn't really care about that, but he got so much research done and so much accomplished. And he found out he wasn't super likable. Like most of his staff didn't really like him, and most of his students didn't like him. And his wife said she didn't even like him that much. So I mean, but he wasn't a bad person. He definitely didn't kill anybody. So all that back to your question, nature versus nurture. I do think that it's both. It's not either or. I think there are times that a person could have the genetic makeup to make them more prone to that, but it would also make them a good soldier in battle, right? So some of those people we would look up to, like Patton or somebody. Like if you had too much empathy, you're not like driving tanks into the enemy and mowing people over. So there is a purpose for that kind of genetic makeup on the one hand, but on the other hand, if it's not channeled correctly and not disciplined correctly, back to the dog, you could have a lovely, sweet pit bull, but you can also have a really aggressive, nasty pit bull. So there's a genetic component there, but it's also going to be nurture as well. So.
Yeah, this interview might as well be sponsored by Ancestry.com because I want each and every one of you guys to sign up to make sure you guys do not have any sketchy people in your family. That would be crazy. Mom, sign up. You need to see your genealogy. You need to get those that DNA checked out because I think that's really interesting. I mean, it kind of seems like it's both, right? You have that nature aspect where it's like you look at your genetic code, like okay, maybe there's a marker that most psychopaths have, you just happen to have it. But in the doctor's case, I mean, because of his environment, he didn't really lash out the way that other people did that had a similar makeup, right? You kind of see this guy, he's probably, that must be crazy, like realizing that everyone around you all of a sudden, like, oh yeah, this person doesn't really like me, and like I don't really have a lot of empathy, and you think that's normal, but then when you interact with other people, you might notice something different. And I think that's a really cool takeaway. I think it just shows that there's always opportunities to see how you can influence someone's behavior to be better and to be good. I don't think there is a case of like, just because someone has a genetic makeup that kind of looks like they're not going to be, sane or whatever, that doesn't mean that you can't still, help that person become a good person. I feel like if you really care about other people, you explore that empathy. Even if people can't receive it all the time, that doesn't mean it's not worth showing it, because you never know how that can affect someone's way of understanding the world around them, understanding, like social communication, understanding how to pursue your dreams, how to pursue your hobbies and stuff. So I think that's really cool how, your research kind of shows you that, there are some people that may have that marker, but that doesn't mean that's the end all,
Right.
explanation for why they are who they are. And I know that you said you also love reading novels that are very like thriller-like and have a lot of mystery. Do you have any favorite forms of media that you like consuming that kind of give you that same rush when you're writing stories with these characters?
You know, other than reading? Oh, well, I listen to probably 2 to 3 audiobooks a week. Because I don't like to sit a lot and I have to sit to write. So, but I love to consume story. So you can do that while you're walking, cooking, cleaning, whatever, you know. So I love audiobooks. By the way, just quick sales point, my Mortician series, the first 6 are all in audio. This series is, it was sold to an audiobook company, the Almost True Crime series, and then we just got the rights back, so my agent is currently trying to sell it. So hopefully that'll be out in audio too. So a lot of audiobooks, a lot of podcasts. I'm a podcast junkie. And I think that's what, and I love, of course, movies and long TV series that explore, you know, a story over many episodes. I think with this series, part of the way that I got the idea to do the podcast was because I'm such a podcast junkie. And so with the Almost True Crime series, each book has got a different protagonist, a different main character, because the stories kind of revolve around Jane below average, you know what I mean? It's not, she's not, whoever is the main character, they're not like a detective or a Navy SEAL or a superhero or anything like, they're just she's a real estate lady. Another book, the person is a chef, you know, and owns a cooking store, and another one, she's an interior designer. So they all have different normal careers, and so you couldn't really have that person bumping into a serial killer every other book. I mean, it just wouldn't make sense, right? Most of us hopefully never bump into a serial killer. So what I did is I wanted to link the stories together in a more, because in my mind they were very linked, but I wanted to link them together in a way that readers might get what was in my head. And so I created a true crime podcaster, her name is Molly Shore, and so each book is an episode of, or not an episode, I'm sorry, a season of her true crime podcast. And then so she's exploring the link between these characters, because most of the characters, the main characters, know each other, so we know it's not linked by the bad guy, which is how usually you see how crimes are linked, is that it's the villain who's linking the crimes. But in this case, the crimes all have different villains, but all the people, they happen to know each other. So the podcaster is trying to figure out why does this series of crimes go through the lives of this community of people, and so she does a lot of talking and interacting with her Facebook group that kind of allow me, the author, to bring up some of the questions like nature versus nurture, or how are these things connected, and that kind of thing. So yes, I added to your question, I do consume a lot of podcasts, and that's part of the reason that I got the idea to link these books through a true crime podcaster.
Yeah, no, and I think it does serves as an interesting perspective that goes outside of the other books that I've read that are in the same genre. I think podcasts, like ever since it first started blowing up and stuff, there's been so much diversity in how people go about explaining different things. And for the true crime subgenre of podcasts, like there's some that are really creepy. You know, they have they have that ambiance, you have your headphones in, you have that calm narrator that just drops really crazy details, and it makes you wonder, like, wow, like there's stuff like this that really happens in the world. And that's the feeling that I got reading this book, and I think that just shows just how good of a writer you are. You know, you can't help but to feel like, you know, you're reading this, but you're thinking of it like it's a podcast, because you have your host in the story. Her name is Molly, and, you know, she also has her own explanation for why she dives into true crime. You know, most people, it is curiosity, but for Molly, like, she had a personal experience that made her want to kind of, create this podcast to give awareness to people, to show that, hey, you might be a part of something, like you might end up encountering a situation, with somebody that might have ill intent, and it's good to know that, like, hey, always look for those signs. There's nothing wrong with always, just being cautious.
So this was the other really fun thing with the podcaster. In the first book, she does talk about her personal experience, which is a cold case crime that happened to her when she was in college with her roommate. And she does talk about that. And then as the book progresses, her podcast listeners start sending her emails and comments like, oh, I knew somebody else who went missing from that school at that year. And oh, I knew somebody else who knew somebody. And so as the books progress, this story, she keeps getting more and more information about her cold case because her listeners are new people who knew people who, so that her listeners start trying to help her solve her cold case. And so I haven't done it yet, but my ultimate goal is to then write an 8th book where she goes and solves her original cold case, where there's clues peppered throughout these 7 books about that cold case, and then she will pull those all together and solve it. And in my mind, it is solved, but it is not solved in book form yet, unfortunately. So.
I also have another question about, writing the story, and this is because, I also try writing as well, and I was actually talking to my friends about this earlier. I was writing a couple days ago, and I wrote about this character that I really liked, but I had to kill him off. And
so sad.
I actually went to my mom and I was like, I feel kind of like sad about this. Like I just lost somebody in my life that's completely fictional. And I wanted to ask, like, when you're writing these stories, like, is there an emotional toll that comes with creating stories that kind of gravitate towards like really dark situations? And if you do get that emotional stress from just like having to create these stories, what are your ways to like unwind and kind of disassociate a little bit from like writing a book that could be as intense as The Cliff House?
Well, I have 2 answers. The first answer is that the difference between fictional crime and true crime is that in fictional crime, and I'm looking at my mystery writer author friend who's sitting in the second row there. Most mystery writers, they really have a core principle where they want to see justice in the world and they want to see justice done. They want the bad guys and the bad girls to get theirs. And in real life, that often does not happen, and it's really tragic. But in a mystery, fictional mystery, they go to jail or they get killed or they get theirs. It's like they're not getting away scot-free, that is for sure in my book. So it gives me a sense of like closure. And also, I would say that in my fictional books, there's no gratuitous crime, there's no torture porn. I don't do that. It's more like off-screen or that kind of thing. So they can be scary and intense, but I don't like delve into cruelty or anything like that because my personality, I can't take that. I don't enjoy it. I don't want to see it. Implication, a lot of poison, occasionally a gunshot, that kind of thing. But then the other thing is that when COVID hit, I was like, I don't know what book into this series. And I just was like, needed a break. I needed something lighter and funnier and not so serious. And so that's when I started the Mortician series, which is sounds ridiculous. I'm writing a Mortician series for fun and games, but it's kind of like the lighter side of death. And it's humorous, and it's got a paranormal aspect to it. And that really helped me to write something. Again, I'm not shying away from death, which is what everybody is afraid of during COVID, right? I'm looking death in the face, but I'm finding funnier aspects to it. All her ghosts, what the storyline there is that she starts life in the first book as a hairstylist, and she gets the request to go do the hair and makeup for one of her clients who's dead. And she really needs them. She's creeped out, but she needs the money. So she goes to the mortuary, and when she touches a dead body's hair, she gets their final sensations in life. Of course, she doesn't know that's what's happening in the first book. It takes her a long time to figure it out. But if that person was murdered, they just keep following her around and influencing her life until she solves the crime. So, but then at the end, she sends them off into the bright light, love, and peace place. So it has a happier kind of and the way they follow her around is funny. Like one of the ghosts was a kleptomaniac and a hoarder. So now she's stealing things and filling her apartment up, which is very tiny, and can't get rid of anything. And, you know, so there's like funny, silly predicaments. And for some reason that really helped me. So just switching gears sometimes, like if things are getting too intense in one story, then maybe to switch gears and write something a little bit different, but still within my branding is another way to do it. So.
No, that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. And this kind of leads into like my final question. I mean, this series that starts off with the Cliff House, it's around 7 novels, and then, you know, I know you finished it, and then you said you were planning an 8th book later on that you just want to use it to wrap everything up. And then I know you just talked about the Mortician series. Do you mind just letting us know like how, like, what book you're writing right now, or if there's anything in the future that you're planning, or just something that we could look forward to? Because yeah, you definitely seem like a very dedicated author to writing stories that you enjoy. And I think for anyone that's listening to this, you know, I could totally see them being like, oh my gosh, like what is Greta doing? Like what can I do to like follow her on her journey, and like what is she up to? So do you mind just shedding some light on that?
No, I love to talk about myself. Don't we all? So what I'm writing right now is book 9 in the Mortician series, which will wrap up the Mortician series. So there's 9 books and 2 novellas in that series. And then I got an idea, which I'm very excited about, for a standalone thriller with an AI component. But because I've been reading thrillers that have AI stuff, but it's always like sort of like 2001 Space Odyssey, where the AI goes crazy and takes over the world. And in this, it's going to be more the corrupting effect of AI on a human being. And so I'm super, and so I was talking to my agent about that. She was like, oh yes, write that, hurry up and finish your Mortician series. So I'm trying to hurry up, but you know, it is what it is. Creativity just takes its time. But that's what I'm working on, and then I think I'm gonna do my AI thing because I'm inspired, and then eventually I'm gonna write the wrap up to this series, which is, the series is wrapped. It's not like if you decide to read the series, you're gonna get to the end of book 7 and go, darn it, it's a cliffhanger. It's not a cliffhanger. It's wrapped up. But I do have an idea for another mystery that would pull in some interesting elements from all the books. So but that's what I'm thinking.
Awesome. And just to give you that layup, like if anybody did want to follow you on social media to understand exactly what you're like doing and like how they can get a copy of your books and stuff, outside of like right now, but you know, where can they see what you're what you're doing?
So I'm not super great at social media, so I'll just be honest with you. I do have a Facebook Greta Boris author page. I do have Instagram. If you follow me or message me on Instagram, expect a minimum of a 3-month wait for any kind of, I'm so bad. But I have a pretty active newsletter list, and for people who do sign up for my newsletter, there's freebies. You get, I have a prequel to this series. It's a novella, and it's called The Dark Room, and it kind of, it's my favorite creepy. It's a good creepy house story, and so that's like a prequel to this series. And then I also have a story in the Mortician series, which comes between books 1 and 2, but doesn't need to be read in order, where she goes off to mortuary school. And it's her adventures at mortuary school. So both of those, if you sign up at my on my website, which is gretaboris.com, are available, and then you get on my newsletter list. And I send a newsletter about every other week with things that are happening, like being here, or great deals on other authors' books. And sometimes author friends have a book marked down to 99 cents for a week that's another mystery thriller that I think my list might like, and that kind of thing. So the best way is to sign up for my newsletter, because I do email people back and I am very engaged with them. But if you're not into that, Facebook is great. Just don't expect a lot out of me.
Awesome, thank you so much. That does conclude the interview, but we will have a Q&A session for those that do want to ask Greta some questions. And then for someone that's like really impatient, oh my gosh, I need to grab this book right now. Greta also brought copies that you guys can buy after the Q&A session. But this does wrap up the interview here at Barnes & Noble. Thank you guys again for being a part of BookBase history. And Greta, thank you so much for being the person that we talked to about your stories. They're amazing. I've read the book. I personally think it's a great novel, so you guys should definitely check it out. But that's it. Thank you guys so much.
I'm going to open it up to a Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand and we can get some questions in there.
Are you a pantser or a plotter?
I'm a plantser. I can't ever make up my mind. I love the idea of being a plotter, and I'll like plot, and then I'll get like partway through, like the opening, and maybe part into the edging toward the middle of the book, and I'll be like, this is so stupid. How did I ever think this was a good idea? And then I have to, so I like plot a little, stop and, have a mental breakdown, plot a little more, write a little more, have another existential crisis. So that's, yes, my very productive, sane way of writing.
How do you balance the kind of like the overarching character development of your podcaster character with like the plot, the individual plot of each story?
It's like a giant crossword puzzle. It's the same as like the Mortician series, because she's the same character in every book, and so there are these character arcs and plot arcs that go from book 1 to book 9, but then you have to have the story within each. So kind of the way, I mean, it's an ever-evolving thing, but kind of the way that I do it is sort of separately. So there's the plot of that book, but then I also look, when I'm writing a series, I try to look to at least 3 books at a time, like what is going to be the arc, the behind-the-scenes arc of the character during the 3 books. What do I need to lay down? What do I need to make the hook to get from one book to the next? If there's like in the Mortician series, it's a very slow burn romance. So they meet in book 1 and marry in book 9. That's very slow. So how much is happening, and so with Molly is the same. I had all the basic stories written as the podcast seasons, and then I just did like her arc and what happens with her in a completely separate document. And that was, my editor was not happy with me. Like, fitting that in was just kind of like, but anyway, yeah, that's probably not what you wanted to know, but it's confusing. The short answer is, it's really hard.
So for this book, like you said in a cliff house in Laguna Beach, and then I see the other books, obviously there's locations like a manor, a cabin. How do you come up with the process for determining where you want the location for each book to be set in? What determines that for you?
Settings just inspire story in me. Like when I go somewhere that captivates me, it's like, ooh, what if something like this happened here? That it's kind of that kind of thing. Or sometimes it's, so like for instance, the Keep, which is around here somewhere, the Keep takes place out in Black Star Canyon, which is supposed to be the most haunted hiking trail in Southern California. By the way, just a little tidbit of trivia for you all. But years ago, my husband was hiking with the Boy Scouts, and they weren't in Black Star Canyon. They were actually going up Saddleback Mountain, and they found a corpse. They didn't know it was a corpse. They thought at the time that it was a mannequin, But then my husband hiked back down, and that night he was like, wait, why would somebody carry a mannequin, up this really rigorous mountain and leave it in the bushes? That's crazy. So the next morning he got up, called the cops real early, and he went up with 2 sheriffs, and sure enough, it was a guy who died. And so it's like my brain makes these weird connections. So Black Star Canyon, super haunted hiking and or biking trail. Oh, dead body found on a hiking trail. Oh, that would be cool. And then, of course, I decided to make preppers up there in a weird house. And so there's a whole prepper component. So it's because preppers scare me. So I'm like pulling all these things together, and they just make this happy casserole of, it's like, well, I got noodles and I got meat and maybe throw in some peas, like what sounds good, So that's kind of, I love settings. Settings are just the best. Yes, Karen?
Speaking of settings, I've never asked you, have you ever been to a morgue?
No.
Oh, we should go.
I know. We should do a field trip. I think as I'm finishing the last book in the series, we should have a mystery writer field trip. Because I started them during COVID, and I did know people who said, oh yeah, I have a friend who's a mortician, or I know somebody, and I thought, oh, I'd go. But then during COVID, I don't go into a morgue. That just didn't sound wise. But I watched a lot of videos of morgues and morticians, probably more than any of you would ever want to watch. But that would be cool. I would love to do that. Let's talk about it. Yes.
So this question is coming from this one right here. He's a little shy. So you talked about how you kind of have like this beautiful resolution to the stories that they get their happy ending in sort of way.
Yeah.
Would you ever navigate the possibility of non-happy ending? And I don't know, does that open a can of worms for you, or is that something that you just never really thought about?
Well, I don't know. Happy is exactly the right word. I mean, happy, yes, in the Mortician series because they're funny. I mean, in these series, bad stuff happens and characters are not coming back to life, who are dead and that kind of thing. But it's justice. And so I don't enjoy stories that don't have justice. Like the only reason I made it through Breaking Bad was because of Jesse. Right? Jesse became the character that was had this, great turnaround in his life, and he had the happy ending. I would not have been able to watch Walt just go down and down and down and down, and then it ends there, and everybody walks away depressed. That doesn't work for me. So, yeah, to answer your question. A satisfying ending, a justice ending. It doesn't have to be happy.
So you mentioned things you bring parts of yourself such that you're afraid of, conflict, you bring that in. But are there other parts of you or your identity, your personality that you bring into your characters and your books?
Well, I don't think you can help it, right? It just is, because they're coming out of my brain and my head. They're different than me for sure. I use the Enneagram a lot to create characters. The Enneagram is a really ancient personality typing system, and we're all only one type. So not all my characters are my personality type, but they're often people that I know this personality type. My daughter is this personality type, or my husband is it. So there's always that. But they always say your first, and most writers' first fiction novel is almost autobiographical. And so most writers' first fiction novel should never be published. So once you get past that and you get it out of your system, you're like, oh, okay, now I can. But there's always aspects of yourself and or your loved ones. My characters have had arguments with their husbands that my husband and I have had. And the female character always wins. Yeah.
Do you listen to music while you write?
Absolutely not. I'm a musician, so if I start listening to music, then I don't write. Even in coffee shops, sometimes I like to write in coffee shops. If it's a song that is too annoying or one I've played, I'm like, oh, that is really, really ridiculous. I can't, it's really hard. So, no. Some people do though. Some people love it. But
a number of your stories have stunningly handsome, like main male characters. Anyone particularly?
No, just pull from air. No. Of course, a lot of the male, not the villains, the good guys, characters do have attributes of my wonderful, lovely husband that I actually admire. And yes, so yes, darling, you do show up in my books in little bits and pieces of you in many ways.
Awesome.
Hey, any more questions?
Jeremy, you had another question?
Yeah.
I just love the design of the covers and like the recurring motif of the doors. How much of the input on like the design process of that do you have, or how'd you come up with that motif?
I was really lucky that I did get some, because those books are with a traditional publisher, and you get what you get, you know. But that publisher and I did noodle around ideas. The publishing house actually came up with the idea of a door in the ocean, and then since the titles were all places, we were like, oh, duh, let's just keep, with the different doors. And so then the art, the graphic artist came, with a few tweaks of us going, not that door, oh, not that color, or we kind of came up with the theme. But I just love, because all the books do take place like where in the area I live in. So Laguna Beach, San Juan Capistrano, the farthest afield is the cabin where part of the book takes place up in Big Bear, because I needed a snowstorm, because that book has a home invasion story aspect. Oh, home invasion stories are so freaking scary that I had to write that one. So that has a home invasion aspect, and I wanted it in the snow. It just seems so atmospheric. So that's as far as the books go. Otherwise, they're all like around the beach, and that one even has part of it is in Dana Point. So yeah.
Questions? All right, a little round of applause here. Thank you so much. By the way, a little side note, I'm actually still thinking about what you said about Black Star Canyon, the hike. I love that hike. I do that with my girlfriend. I've done that with my friends. That's terrifying that you said that. So I don't know if I'm going to do that hike again. It's very scary.
You should read The Key.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And then go on the hike. Perfect.
Hi, I'm Greta Boris. I am the author of the Almost True Crime series and the Mortician Murders, and you can check them out on BookBase.